Hello, everyone. Welcome, Dillah. Welcome, Gracia. Thank you for joining us for Women in Design Week 2023, Voices for a Creative Future, and it's presented by the Faculty of Design at LaSalle College of the Arts. I'm Joselyn Sim, and I will be your moderator for today's panel discussion. It's titled Dreams Taking Flight. In this panel discussion, we charter the career paths of the panelists, Dillah and Gracia, and ask them questions about how they began their journey in design and what they have learned along the way, and how they built their dreams overseas away from Singapore. Before we begin, I would like to thank everyone for spending the next 45 minutes with us. If you have a question to ask the panelists, you can type it out anytime in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and we will get to them at the end during the question and answer segment. Let me begin by stop sharing the slide, and then we can see everybody. Awesome. So hang on. Okay, I'm unpinned. So I am very, very pleased to have Dillah joining us from London and Gracia on the other side from New York. Welcome. Dillah is hey Dillah, I know you're a creative director and partner in BBH London. And Gracia, our recently graduated 2 years ago during COVID, recent graduate from LaSalle, and now you're in Parsons School of Design in New York. Maybe you want to do a quick introduction of yourselves to us? Dillah.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So my name is Dillah. It is short for Nura Dillah, which means light of equality and justice in Arabic, which would be a great name if I was a lawyer or a judge. But alas, I am a creative director and board partner at BBH London. I have been in London for about 1.5 years now. And before that, I was a creative director in Los Angeles and New York. I was bi-coastal for 4 years. And basically the projects that, I lead globally are usually non-traditional advertising projects in the space of experiential technology, innovation, and social.
Great. Gracia, I'm sure you are making change in New York now. What are you doing?
I wish I am, but I wish I had such a cool intro.
Your program is like, wow. So maybe tell us a bit more what you do in Parsons.
Yeah, so hi everybody. I'm Gracia. I'm in Parsons doing a master's in design and urban ecologies. So how I explain it to people when I say that name of the program, everyone's like, wait, what? Like, what are you talking about?
Long title.
Yeah. But I think the essence of what I'm studying is urban studies. So looking at the city as an ecology, in the same way that you think of like biological systems as ecologies, the urban fabric, the ecology in itself. And so that's kind of what I'm studying from a design lens, because Parsons is a design school. And yeah, previously I was doing design strategy in Singapore with a focus on more like circular design, human-centered frameworks. And yeah, now I've been here since August last year. And yeah, so that's me.
Wow, fantastic. I'm so happy that you guys can join. I know the time zone difference. Gracia woke up at what time? 5:30. Now you're here at 7 a.m.
Yes, it started at 6:30. So I'm like winding up for the day. So
Gracia, maybe you can start. Tell us what's your day like, in school in Parsons.
Yeah. So I mean, it's a graduate program, so we have quite a bit of flexibility. I think the thing is that the program is quite small. So it's only like 8 of us in this kind of tiny program, and a lot of the work surrounds like building communities, finding out. Currently we are working in a neighborhood in New York City called Sunset Park. So we work very closely with a non-profit organization there, and the whole idea is to make space for the community. I think being here, you see development in a very different way. It doesn't quite happen like in the way of Singapore where it's very top down. So here communities take a lot more ownership of their space. So we work with the community to find out what are the needs, find out what's lacking, and how we can advocate for that in the face, whether it's like working with developments or policymakers, and yeah, doing some activism work. So that's kind of what my work surrounds now. Yeah.
So talking about people, right, working with different groups of people and
Yeah.
all that, I'm sure Dillah as well will deal with a different type of people, right? It's about audiences. So tell us, what do you do in BBH in London?
Yeah, what I do right now between my role as a creative director and partner, it's probably like 40% managing people and humans, and not just audience, but internally, helping other women, other people of color, especially in their career growth, and also finding opportunities and partners in terms of, clients and collaborators to actually really push the diversity, equity agenda. And also that's the 40%, and the 60% bit are basically leading a bunch of projects for a couple of international clients like Netflix, Google, Audi, and stuff like that, in their creative briefs. Usually they will come to us with a marketing problem or an operational problem, and we basically need to find creative solutions on how to handle it, usually in the form of marketing or experiential or through design, or sometimes mix it all together. And yeah, I usually will have a team under me, which are, consisting of account management who service the clients, strategies, who comes up with the unique insights on what we, need to focus and solve on, and also a team of like writers, art directors, and designers, and just making sure that everybody gets along well, that we come up with the best ideas possible. And it's not just about coming up with great ideas, but making sure we're aligned and check in terms of business and profit and stuff like that. So it's essentially like being a mom to many people.
Wow.
So sometimes
Wow.
a psychotherapist.
Gracia, you're in for that already in the near future.
Oh no, I don't know whether I want to be a mom yet.
Bigger groups of people, communities, yeah, different, even all walks of life, yeah, is an extension of that. And I mean, the things that you guys are doing, as females, you're out there. And I'm sure for this webinar, everybody wants to know, why did the both of you decide to go overseas? What was this thing that, made you pursue a career in design overseas? I think we start with Dillah. I'm curious to hear, how did you do it?
I was always like, as a kid, I always wanted to know if the grass is really greener on the other side. I was like so fascinated by art and design. I remember like I didn't grow up with internet, right? Like probably only as a teenager.
You're showing your age, yeah?
Wow.
I know, I'm showing my age. Literally,
That's crazy.
I know, literally, I would go to the library, like in primary school, and I would just look at all the, art and design by other artists from all over the world. And they were always so bold, always so fascinating in terms of their output. I remember like Dadaism and Marcel Duchamp. I was like, wow, so ballsy. Like, I want to be like that. But then, I asked myself, like, why aren't we like that? Are we impacted by our environment? Are we impacted by, government, the way that, were they encouraged to express themselves from a very young age? Because I clearly was not. I grew up in an extremely modest household, and I'm not gonna lie, I was impacted by systemic biasness, aka racism, that made me, you just wonder, right, if the problem was me or the situation I'm in.
Right.
And living abroad was just something like, my parents could not fund me, so I just have had the itch. If I want to try something else, I need a business to basically fund me, or a company to fund me. So that's why it was always the case that if I got a job, I was going to find a job in an international company that basically would give me a different environment that could potentially get me to basically beyond Singapore. And that was, yeah, just how, like, with that goal in mind, that was just how that I knew that I wanted to explore beyond Singapore.
Oh, that sounds like something that Gracia was considering when I spoke to her when she just graduated. And then she came to me, Jos, I want to go overseas and study. And then you went ahead to do the application and all that. So yeah, Gracia, tell us what was it like? I know you worked in chemistry for a while, and then you were really, really happy with that. And then after that, you came up with this decision. Tell us, what made you pursue this in Parsons?
For me, like I think I always wanted to, I think similar to Dillah, like always wanted to see whether the grass is greener. Always curious about like what's happening outside of Singapore. And I think when I was in poly, I had some experience working overseas as well, and I really enjoyed that. I was working in Cambodia, and for me, like it was quite interesting back then because like when people hear Cambodia, especially a few years back, people are like, "Huh, like why are you going to Cambodia to work?" Like there was just this kind of reactions, but I really enjoyed myself. Like I learned so much from the people there. It was such a different environment, and then I think from there it also like opened my eyes that okay, the world not as scary as the people around you might make it seem. So for me, like I was a lot more open-minded by the time I got to like like this age that okay, like um it's not that scary to go out of Singapore. So when I started working at chemistry, I had a few colleagues that had experience studying overseas. And they were also like involved in academia. And so it kind of planted the idea in my mind that okay, like I think at some point I will want to pursue my like further my studies because I really enjoy studying. I do enjoy the academic environment. I enjoy like having that space and freedom to like try different things and to learn from people. So like okay, like I had this idea in mind, and then for me similarly, I also didn't have like the financial resources to go overseas. It was never like an option for me. Like it's like local comes first, and then like foreign overseas are like options are like okay, they're like secondary. So I started applying for the scholarship and everything worked out. Yeah, so I guess it was a series of events that kind of opened me up. And for me it was like I didn't really choose New York just because I guess it sounds cool, but I was really interested in the activism here, and I think the school itself has quite an experimental approach to the way that they create programs. So that was kind of what drew me here, I guess.
Yeah, I guess you guys mentioned about I'm very curious what's on the other side. And the perspectives in Singapore kind of like say, okay, maybe you shouldn't do it, or it's quite different in Singapore. Yeah. So that outward look, and then it makes you like Gracia, first step, why not just apply? How do I do it? Okay, let's look for scholarships. For Dillah, it's like, oh, maybe I should try companies, international companies. So are these your platforms that you have thought about to spearhead those decisions? It's all about finding those opportunities. Maybe you can like share a bit with like how do you find these opportunities? For example, Dillah, maybe you can talk more about I'm sure you would have applied to 1 million companies. How do you do it? What do you write to them? What do you say?
Yeah, 100%. It's like it's really about when the the world closed one door at you, just be unbashfully knocking at other doors itself. So I literally have to like, yeah, it was a struggle. I think when after I graduated, like just to get into my first foot into a bunch of international companies was really tough, because I think like I didn't know anybody, and back then advertising in Singapore, the companies were very much run by nepotism. Not kid you not, like the way that you want to get a job is because if you know someone else in there. And unfortunately, I'm an introvert and I did not know how to network as a student.
As with most
and
designers,
like
introverts.
Yeah, 100%.
Exactly.
So I'm like, oh, so what I had to do is then like use the stuff that I actually learned in LaSalle, which is, target audience, getting your unique selling point and things like that. You taught me that.
Jocelyn looks so happy.
Yes. There you go, guys.
100% listen to your teachers. So yeah, what was it was that I was like, okay, what was going to be my unique selling point that nobody could have, that would make all these agencies then look out for me and wants to give me a seat at the table. So what I did was, okay, look at myself, like there's so many people who are graduating the same time as me. All of them would probably say they could be junior art directors or designers and things like that. But what they couldn't do is that most of us can come up with ideas and things like that and execution, but how do we actually produce it, what does it take in terms of production and stuff like that. So instead of straight away going to a design or ad agency, I decided to pivot myself and go to a production house. And I literally had to start from the bottom to just show that, you know, I have the grit and really here for the long run. So I started off as a janitor at a production house, then basically say, hey, I can paint that, I can set design that, I can help produce that. And from there, just saying, you know, just being open to like, yes, I can do that. Yes, I'm not gonna get, you know, that blockage like hinder me, and just like find ways around it. I ended up picking a bunch of skills that nobody else that, you know, graduated during my time had. So I ended up, you know, BBH ended up approaching me saying that, hey, you have all these skills, like would you like to come to BBH? And BBH was all about the power of difference and things like that. So essentially, when I joined BBH, I actually carved a new role for myself. Back then, there wasn't really digital creatives and things like that. So with all the skills that I have, and you know, the iPhone just came out in 2007 or 8, and then there was all these apps, and basically the world was looking at technology from a different angle. I was like, I'm going to be the creative that owned that niche. And basically then you know, just companies end up like, oh, we want a piece of that. So yeah, it's all about finding that unique selling point, and also looking at what is out there, you know, what is concentrated, how you can be unique, what is your strengths, and you know, how you can make yourself almost like a unicorn, that based on your strengths that people would actually really need in their company or their environment and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think Gracia had to do the same thing, right? For scholarships. I'm sure those who were trying out for scholarships, you have to compile your portfolio, you have to write a million things to prepare.
Yes.
Yeah, so much to get there. So then how do you sell yourself, Gracia? How do you get yourself out there?
I guess I guess the process of applying for a scholarship is quite different from Dillah's. Like it's so inspiring. Like I was like, wow, very inspired by whatever Dillah just shared. For myself, like the whole scholarship process was a journey in itself. Of
Yes.
Yeah, there's so many things
You
to
know how Singapore
compile.
is like, right? It's all the systems,
Yeah,
procedures, steps, you know.
yeah, and exactly like also I think a big part of it is also reconnecting with people that you know to write letters of recommendations for you. And this process is also something that I think it's not like you can just go to someone that doesn't really know you to write a letter of recommendation. And I think I attribute a lot of probably why I got the scholarship at the end, because of the people that wrote the letters of recommendation for me. And because these are people that are recognized, and like Joselyn was one of them.
Thank you.
And like yeah, like really
It
and
worked.
they wrote these like really amazing things about me. And when I'm reading that, I'm like, is that me? Like, oh my god, I'm so touched, you know, like yeah. And that whole process of like, okay, I don't know what's gonna happen. The uncertainty of like, oh, your life is gonna change and you're gonna move overseas is also quite a big thing. But one thing to say that I guess that I find a bit sad that there's not a lot of options in terms of scholarships in Singapore for like design specific. There are like art scholarships, but for design scholarships it's quite niche. There's only a couple of options, I think. But yeah, so I think for me it was more of like seeing what are the options out there, just giving them a shot. And I was really at a point that like, okay, if this doesn't work out, what are my other options? Having backup plans. I think that's always part of the planning process if you want to do this. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think we all know that from your conversations, it's about finding that opportunity, always being very curious of what's out there. So all these are good tips for you know, if there's students listening in who wants to venture overseas, these are the things that they should consider and do. But also I want to know more about were there any you know, negative aspects to this whole journey? Let's say, for example, at the workplace, Dillah, you know, you venture overseas. I'm sure as a female designer, apart from facing a new country, new culture? Were there other stories that you can share with us? I remember when I went overseas to work in Hong Kong. Hong Kong, yes, very near, but if you don't know Cantonese, you're kind of screwed, right? So you need to speak Cantonese in order to fit in a way, right? So that was my thing. And luckily, I knew how to speak Cantonese. So yeah, Dillah, share with us, in London, did you come across any of these difficulties?
Yeah, definitely. It's very interesting how, like, because like just comparing when I was in the US, I felt that it was easier for me to just like fit in, because I think back in Singapore we were very much exposed to all the media, the Kardashians and that were Americanized, so we sort of like understand the culture a little bit more, the way they speak, the lingos and stuff like that. And though Britain once colonized us, I thought yeah, we spell the same, we drive on the same side of the road, but I realized that it was really, really different over here. The culture, like how you communicate and things like that, because there's a very British way of doing or talking in the professional settings. They usually are very politically correct, so it's kind of hard for you to understand like clients or your bosses, or even down to your colleagues and people who report to you, about what they actually mean, because they're kind of beat around the bush a little bit and things like that. So you have to really like read between the lines, because it's either they're too politically correct or they are extremely sarcastic. So I think the first few months I would go back home, I'm like, what the heck are they talking about? Like, what do they actually mean and things like that. Now, it's much easier, but also other than just the way they talk, just the way they consume and interact with media and design and things like that are really interesting. And it's in terms of design, especially, this is such a mature town or city with design, the way they were exposed to it. Just look at the underground design system, right, for their tubes, which was done in 1836, and it's so iconic. Like, they are just so used to like good design that it's in everywhere, and you just have to try harder to break the mold and find something new. So it's always keep you in your toes, just to learn about people and just be able to, I guess, produce something better than what they've already seen and consumed.
Yeah, that's quite daunting if you first encounter a place like that. Yeah, I mean, this is definitely different. Like, if you go as a tourist, obviously you see the country differently. I think, Gracia, what do you think? How is it like in New York? I know we had a conversation earlier, right? How is it like in New York today? Are there lots of things happening in terms of race and culture? Does that impact you as a female designer in New York?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think like Dillah just mentioned about US being kind of, I mean, we are kind of familiar with US culture because like media is so Americanized. But nothing could prepare me for New York. Like, I think we all have a certain perception of what New York is like, what America is like in general. And coming here, I think I came with some like preconceived notions of what to expect. Like, everyone is like telling me like, oh my gosh, why are you going there? Like, it's so dangerous. Everyone's going to shoot you and everyone has guns. Yeah, but I think my experience has been slightly different just because of the space that I work within. I'm like constantly, I mean, the school itself is like very focused on social justice, very focused on like advocacy, things like that. So the kind of people that I interact with is quite different as well. I think one of the big culture shocks when I first arrived was like when I got to class and everybody introduces themselves with their pronouns, including professors. So like I would say like, oh hi, I'm Gracia. I use she, her pronouns. And that's not something we hear a lot in Singapore as well.
Not in Singapore. Yep.
Not at all. Never. I've never
Picking up,
experienced
but
that in
not.
Singapore.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, but I found that like really amazing, like being intentional about creating safe spaces for people that do not conform to like binary gender norms and things like that. And it also signals to people that you are in a safe space where you can be yourself, at least to a certain extent. That we recognize that there are people outside of the binary norms. And that for me was quite eye-opening because initially it's like a bit of a shock. You're like, oh, okay. But when you process it and the intention that comes with it, it's like, oh, okay, like I get it. And also like I think that understanding positionality, all of us here, when you go outside of Singapore, like being aware of how Asian you are, and people see you as Asian first. I guess the nice thing about New York is that people come from everywhere, so there's this like bonding that happens because everybody is not from here, or like most people are not from here. Most people that you meet are not from here, so it's nice to bond over that fact. But at the same time, you also are very aware that um you don't just represent Singapore in the sense of people don't see Singapore on your face, they see Asian on your face. And so like Asian is like one big bucket of like people, which can be a good or bad thing depending on how you see it. But for me, I think I'm trying to lean more into that. Like, what does being Asian mean for me? What values that bring for me as a designer? What matters to me? And what are things from my Asian culture that I can contribute to here? Like, yeah. So
That's good. That's good. I think those things you probably didn't really need to think about when you are a designer in Singapore.
yeah,
Right. And then you do think about that more so because you also feel like got Singapore pride lah, you go there, Singapore's not China, you need to talk more about Singapore and who you are as a female designer, especially you're a female Asian person. And on the lines of that, right, we remember beginning of the webinar, we were talking about glass ceiling, whether you're hitting it or you're breaking it. I have to pull Michelle Yeoh in, right, in her recent Oscar winning speech. She mentioned she kung fu the glass ceiling, right? And I thought, wow, finally, things are happening finally, one thing at a time. Maybe Dillah, tell us, share your thoughts. Just like you're a female creative director in the league of big boys, in a big ad agency. What are your thoughts? Have you kind of hit the ceiling a bit or more than that?
Yeah. I would like to think so. I would hope so, that my knuckles are super bruised right now. But yeah, it's interesting when you say, like, with the big boys, because really literally and figuratively, being Asian, I'm super short. I'm not even 150 cm and things like that. So I have to almost, just the way I have to present myself and have to pretend that I'm an extrovert and things like that, just to make sure that I am seen as an equal, if not, I can do better than all these big boys and things like that. But what is really great and really comforting is that over here there are a lot of female leaders, like for example, just at BBH right now, our CEO, our MD, our executive creative director are all females, and they happen to be moms as well. So the thing about us females is that our sense of empathy and like wanting to help with career growth and mentorship and things like that are things that are our superpowers that these male big boys don't have. So what have been great and very heartwarming with like breaking the glass ceiling from my point of view here is that I'm not alone. There's all these ladies that's really great, women support network, just helping each other up, that if we see someone not being heard in a meeting because one of the big boys are talking out loud again, we're like, oh, I think so and so have an opinion as well, would we like to listen to them and things like that. So yeah, it is a tough journey because some days it's easier than others, but all in all, as women, we just need to make sure and know that when we are breaking or shattering or just like making a notch in the glass ceiling, it's not just for us, it's about the other women to come, so that they can just like fly through out of the glass ceiling and just be their blossoming self.
Wow. I'm very, very happy to hear that there are other females out there that's on that same page. I think Gracia, as a student, I hope it's the same thing. Your fellow classmates are giving you that kind of support as well.
yeah. I think when we talk about like the glass ceiling, a lot of the conversation is about like breaking it and pushing it, and that's very necessary, I think. But I think my interest is like questioning why even there is a glass ceiling. Like, where does this come from? Like, why is it that we feel a need to break it? And I think we live in such a hierarchical society that is very masculine, and I can't help but like tie this idea of like climbing the corporate ladder and these ideas of like going up somewhere to some unknown place in these corporate structures as something, or is a system that is so masculine and so um dominated by the male ideal of development, of success. And we see it in our cities, like the work that I do. It's all about like, oh, who can get to the top of the ladder, who
Yeah.
built the tallest building. All these are like very masculine ideals of like, I want to push everybody down and I make my way to the top.
Yeah.
And of course, for women to be in that space, it's amazing. And I think that more women should be in that space of leadership. But also, I think my interest is like, how do we get rid of this idea of like, you know, climbing as a success measure, and how do we equal the playing field? Like I work a lot with like volunteer organizations now, and I see that so many of these activists are women, are moms. They are leading at the front lines, trying to, you know, advocate for equality, equity in these spaces. And it's really quite radical in the sense that it's not constant, like power within these groups are not concentrated on one person, even if um like even decision making is not concentrated on one person, um or like some star player in that team. But how do we equal the playing field so that everybody has a say, has a role to play, and knows where they stand? And it's not about like me taking over and like, you know, like restructuring everything, although I think that there is a space for that. But yeah, those are some of my thoughts.
Wow, I think very, very good perspective coming from Gracia. I do have a question here that kind of links. It says representation matters. Thank you, ladies, for not only representing women in design, but also as a minority, a woman of color. So what is next for both Dillah and Gracia? Staying in the US, UK, or plans to venture to other countries? Maybe we'll ask Dillah. I know Dillah moved from LA to London not too long ago. Yeah, so Dillah, you know, you talked about you know, playing with the big boys and all that. Do you think when you come back, if you ever come back to Singapore, would the game be different? Like what Gracia said, there's no game, you know, it's the same already. I'm in the same league as you.
I really, really hope that it would. I would love to come back to Singapore one day, you know. And I hope the game would be different or basically updated, right? But the thing is, I guess, for us to level the playing field, we have to basically almost, unfortunately, prove why we have to, which sucks, but it's just the way it is. So like I'm like doing all the groundworks now to almost give me like street cred, and also just like puff up my you know, like experience, and be able to like just go back and hopefully you know, just make change. I think with that question as well, like what's next, it's really right now just getting as much experience as possible, trying to, you know, like speak up and actually affect change, not just in the work that I do, but for, you know, the community and the society that I represent. And you know, whatever next might be, you know, it will be Singapore one day. How fast, I don't know. And would I be going to another country after this? I don't know either, because like what have been dictating like me going from, you know, one country and another have always been more about the opportunities and the experience I would get out of it, instead of like a country. So who knows? Yeah, very much just, you know, a bit YOLO in a way, that just it's all about what experience and opportunities and what change I can affect basically for the next chapter.
That's cool that you mentioned the change. That I do know that you also work with non-government organizations and your side projects, Gracia. You know, you can talk to Dillah about it. So Gracia, like I know you're on scholarship and all that. You need to come back at some point in time. But yeah, so will you venture back out when you finish what you need to do in Singapore?
Yeah, I mean, I would love to. Like for me, like I'm always open to travel anyway. Yeah, I feel like the world is such a big place and there's so little time, and I would love to be everywhere all at once. Everything everywhere all at once. Um, but so for me, I think yeah, I similar YOLO wherever like I can contribute wherever I would be valuable. I think I'm open to it. Of course, I think at the end of the day, I still want to go back in Singapore, for various reasons. And I think there's something about like being a designer that is like born and bred in Singapore, working in Singapore. I think that's like very important and to contribute back to the design scene as well, since considering I think Singapore's design scene is still relatively young, or there's still a lot of growth to be done. So for me at some point I think that's like definitely part of the plans. Which part of the plan I don't know. So
No, that's great. It's good to have no plan sometimes so that you can do your YOLO.
yes, exactly.
We have another question here. It's about, great team in LaSalle, of course, getting you guys back. The question is, how do you feel your Singaporean viewpoint will be useful in your international career? So I guess it's about you being a Singaporean in the boardroom for Dillah or in discussion groups, Gracia, talking to communities out there. What is it like? Is it useful? What are the positives of being a Singaporean woman? Big questions.
Interesting.
Wow.
Positives. Shall I talk about positive and not positive at the same
Of
time?
course, of course.
Okay, great, because I
Hot takes.
controversial. So I would start with the bad first, okay? Not positive, then positive. So that's this thing, I don't know about you, Gracia, but like I guess like in our school system, not LaSalle, but primary school and secondary and things like that, it was very much about regurgitating basically information. So it wasn't really encouraged back then, when my lower education, to actually have a point of thought of analyzing and challenging views and things like that. What was great that LaSalle introduced that to me. But so what I found myself being in as a Singaporean woman, sometimes still in that being indoctrinated, that I forgot that I actually can challenge. I can don't just accept. For example, if a government have a law, I'm not trying to tell you to break rules in Singapore, but I do not endorse if any of you guys get caught for that.
Watching you.
I know. But over here you can basically question and think like that and stuff like that. So that took me a little bit of having to reprogram myself because of how I was brought up as a Singaporean woman back in my generation in the 80s and 90s. But then the great thing about being a Singaporean woman is that I come from a very supportive, community and society that always have my back, that I know no matter what, no matter where I go, I have really strong roots because of my culture and tradition. And that also for us, because being as diverse as we are in Singapore, is that I know a little bit of Mandarin, I know a little bit of Tamil,
Right?
I understand, right? I just understand the different culture, the different food and things like that. And that really helps with, a more progressive and diverse workplace, that, your sense of empathy and compassion and like knowing how to also code switch, when you're within people of your same group, but also with, people of different cultures and tradition and things like that. I feel that not many people here in London have it. And I am blessed with it because I am a Singaporean woman with the experiences I have growing up back home.
Wow, you've seen a lot and you've experienced a lot. Gracia, what about you? Positive. I think later we go back to Dillah for the negative, maybe a little bit. But yeah, the positives.
I think one of the immediate positives that I think of is this exposure that we have to other cultures. I think it's something very valuable. Like one of my friends here that I met here while I was here, she grew up in the US, but she went her entire school years without ever being in the same classroom as a white person. So it's a very common thing that I mean, it's so surprising to me, right? Like, I think to all of us, it's like,
Mhm.
huh? Like, what do you mean? Like, for us, it's like, it's engineered into the system that you have exposure to people of other cultures. But here it's not. If you live in a community that is very homogenous, you can basically go your whole childhood or most of your life without ever seeing someone who looks different from you. And I think like that is something very that opens us up in a different way. Although yeah, we are like we are taught to like, okay, you do this and you have a certain way of thinking. But at the same time, this like racial exposure and like cultural exposure that we have to other people is incredibly valuable. That's something that transfers well to wherever you go, I think, throughout the world. And yeah, like having that Singaporean viewpoint of someone that has grown up in a multitude of Asian cultures. You when you go overseas, when you see people of like different cultures, I guess you're like less adverse to it, or it's less like intimidating to you as well to be in that kind of space of like people from different backgrounds. And that transfers well anywhere. So
Yeah, so we're kind of like what you call that, multicultural, diversify and all that already. And that kind of helps us in a way, right? As even as women, doesn't matter, right? It helps us in a way. Would you say that anyone is capable of venturing overseas, whether it's for school or work? I think this question comes in is, the hesitation or the doubts that one person might have. Anyone is capable? Any
I think
female
maybe
designers is capable? Yeah.
I can take this question first. I think that it comes with a lot of prerequisites, right? So I wouldn't say that everyone is capable just because like looking at like financial status, whatever situation you have at home, maybe health issues. Yeah, there's so many things at play to pack up and leave Singapore. So I wouldn't say that everyone is capable, but of course, if you have the means, and everything is like, and you have the opportunity to do it, I think that not being not making decisions out of fear is an important thing when you consider venturing overseas. I think it's very easy to fall into the trap of like, oh, this place very dangerous, this place very dangerous, like, oh, don't go
Yeah.
this place got no Asian people, everybody want to kill you, that kind of thing. But yeah, don't make decisions out of fear. If you have the opportunity and you really want to try it, I think it's always a good opportunity to try it regardless of like the length of time. But like I wouldn't like say everybody is capable of it, because there's so many, and it's a very privileged position to say to go overseas. And yeah, so
Yeah, Dillah, you're like nodding.
Yeah, what Gracia says like super spot on. Like the reason why I could basically do it is because I have a great support system. My parents are
Yeah.
healthy enough that I don't need to worry, and I have the support of my sister, my family. If anything goes wrong back home, that I don't feel like guilty for being so far apart. But like what Gracia says is really true. Is like if you really want to just like spread your wings and go to another country, do not focus on the problems, because with most problems there are solutions. So think about what those solutions could be, and then with the power of the internet and things like that, it's easy to find like ways you can solve certain things. It's easy to find people that you can connect with to ask for help, and stuff like that. So yeah, it's all about knowing how to really use your resources. And yes, there will be problems. There will be times that you're going to be uncomfortable, that you'll feel alone and things like that. But I guess what is really good to think about is that whenever life puts you in situation that you are just not comfortable with, that is the best time to actually learn about yourself. And when you truly learn about yourself, then you can truly be creative. Then you can understand like, holy crap, I'm actually very resourceful. Like, it doesn't matter if I'm alone, I can do this and this and this. So it's about just taking the plunge, and like, if you can and if you want, then just do it.
Wow. Yeah, just do it, guys. I think the YOLO thing grass is greener, going through the process, we all have to do it and eventually be there as a female Singaporean designer, have a voice, doing what you love to do, obviously. And the whole, webinar that we have here, we're talking about how we survive overseas, not survive, sorry, how we deal with the challenges that we have overseas. We talked a lot about that. I think there's a question here that asks, do employers overseas place a lot of emphasis on academic qualifications? Were those things a roadblock for you guys, or no, it's no problem? Any thoughts, Dillah?
It wasn't a roadblock for me, but it is like, it's not basically just it's more not about employers, it's about the visa system. For you to get a working visa in countries, so for example in the US, you need to get this visa like called the extraordinary alien visa. That's the actual term. I know.
What a term.
I know. While in the UK, it's a highly skilled worker visa. And with this visa prerequisite, you need to basically have at least a degree. So thankfully, with my education back in LaSalle and stuff like that, so it was easy. And also with some of the countries, then you need to prove that, you actually graduated in a spot that, in a school that taught everything in English. If not, you're going to have to take basically English tests and stuff like that. So there are those things. They need to see papers. They need to see where you went to school. They need to see, that you actually have a degree and things like that. But beyond academic, there are also things that they want to see, whether you could actually bring value to the economy and the country in a way that nobody else in the country could do so. So that's the easiest way for you to get a visa from. So, having a great portfolio, great book, great thinking, and even having some social clouds actually help in the visa process. So it's more not really about the companies that hire you, but it's like whether you can convince the people behind the visa wall that you are worthy for this, extraordinary alien or high skilled worker visa to get a spot.
Yeah,
maybe I can just add on.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I mean, whatever Dillah just shared, I think it really is exactly that process that I had to go through. But I think just adding on this, particularly in New York, I guess I get the impression that a lot of things have to do with connections, whether it's personal connections or work connections, being at the right place at the right time, knowing the right people who can get you into the door is very important. A lot of times I think I've heard quite a few stories of people co-emailing and going through LinkedIn. And of course you can do that. But a lot of jobs here are through connections, knowing the right people. Yeah. So
okay, that would probably be a conversation for our next Women in Design Week. I'll get you back, Gracia. We have time limit, and thank you for all the wonderful things that you've taught us today and shared with us today. Thank you to the audience for the questions. I know you have some and I can't answer some as well. Thank you, Dillah and Gracia, for joining me today. Please take a look at, before we conclude, quickly, let me just share the slides again. Before we conclude, I'd like to invite all of you to join us for the remaining discussion. There is a live session tomorrow on Friday. If you'd like to attend, please join us. You can scan the QR code on the left to register your interest. We will appreciate if you could complete also a survey feedback form by scanning the QR code on the right. We will leave the slide on the screen for the next minute. Dillah, Gracia, I know very early in the morning, especially for Gracia, thank you so much for giving such wonderful insights to our conversation today. I think the audience really, really appreciate that. I wish everyone a good evening, and I will see you guys very, very soon. For some of you, tomorrow. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
bye.
Bye.